So there's this new class of drugs that's kind of quietly taking over everything. Our bodies, our culture, our society. You probably heard the names, right? Ozempic, Wegovy. They're everywhere. They're being hailed as this miracle cure for obesity, the biggest thing to happen in decades. But is that the whole story? What's really going on behind this revolution? Let's dig in. Okay, so picture this. Author Johann Hari walks into a Hollywood party after we've all been in lockdown for months. He's expecting to see normal people, but instead the room is full of folks who look, well, unnaturally thin, almost gaunt. He asks a friend, what is going on? How is everyone so trim? And she lets him in on Hollywood's big new secret, a drug that was just tearing through the industry. And that Hollywood secret? Yeah, it's not a secret anymore. It is one of the biggest stories in the world. So why? Why is a drug like Ozempic suddenly so incredibly popular? Well, it's because it promises a simple fix to a huge problem that's been spiraling out of control for a long, long time. And when I say the problem is huge, I mean it's staggering. Take the UK, for example. Back in 1979, only about 6% of people were obese. Today, that number is 26%. It is more than quadrupled. And in the US, it's way worse, over 42%. This isn't some niche issue anymore. It's a full-blown public health crisis that really just happened in the blink of an eye. For the last 40 years, what have we been told? Just diet and exercise more. Simple, right? But the data tells a very different story. Professor Tracy Mann dug through decades of research and found that, yeah, people lose some weight in the beginning, but almost all of them gain it right back. Get this, after 2 years, the average dieter has only lost a grand total of 2 pounds. The takeaway is pretty brutal. For most of us, the old methods just flat out don't work. And that is why these new drugs feel like such a miracle. They actually work where pure willpower and countless diets have failed. So how do they pull it off? The science is really fascinating. So after you eat, your body naturally releases this hormone called GLP-1. It's the little messenger that runs to your brain and says, hey, you're full, you can stop eating now. But here's the catch. That natural signal fades away in just a few minutes. Ozempic is basically a synthetic copy of that hormone, but it's got a superpower. It sticks around in your system for an entire week, sending that I'm full signal nonstop. But what's really wild is the debate over how it's actually doing that. The first theory was that it's all about your gut. It just slows down digestion so you feel physically stuffed. But the newest research, it suggests it's actually a brain drug. It gets into your brain and just changes your desires. It turns up the volume on the part of your brain that says, I'm satisfied, and turns down the volume on the part that gets a big reward from food. And the effect in the real world is just whoa. When the author Johann Hari started taking it, he said his hunger was cut by about 80%. He'd order his usual lunch, take maybe 3 or 4 bites, and just be completely full. That constant background noise about food, the cravings, it just switched off. A drug that can silence your appetite and make weight just melt away, it sounds almost too good to be true, doesn't it? And well, you know what they say, there's a catch. In fact, there are several, and some of them are pretty concerning. You know, we have been down this road before. Back in the 90s, there was a drug combo called fen-phen. It was hailed as a miracle, it was everywhere, 18 million prescriptions a year. Then the reports started coming in. Catastrophic, irreversible damage to people's hearts and lungs. It got pulled from the market and the company paid out $12 billion. It's a really grim reminder that with brand new drugs, the biggest risks are often the ones we don't know about yet. With Ozempic and these other drugs, a list of pretty serious risks is already starting to take shape. There's research that points to a 50 to 75% increased risk of thyroid cancer. Other huge concerns are things like pancreatitis, losing a dangerous amount of muscle mass, and all sorts of psychological side effects. Let's just focus on one of those. Pancreatitis. It's a condition where your pancreas gets inflamed, and it is supposedly excruciatingly painful. I mean, people have described it as worse than childbirth. And while it's still pretty rare, one study found that taking these drugs makes you 9 times more likely to get it. 9 times. And then there's this weird psychological angle. What happens when you take away food as a way to cope with life? For some people, that impulse doesn't just go away, it just transfers to something else. Our best comparison is from studies on bariatric surgery patients, and they show that about 1 in 10 develop a new compulsive behavior, like alcoholism, gambling, or shopping. The brain still needs soothing, it just finds a new way to get it. And maybe the biggest catch of all, this is not a cure, it's a treatment. The moment you stop the injections, your old appetite comes roaring back. The clinical trials couldn't be clearer. Stop taking the drug, and within a year, most people gain back about 70% of the weight they lost. For almost everyone, this is a lifelong commitment. So when you take a step back and look at the whole situation, you start to realize this is about so much more than just individual health. This is about the kind of future we're actually building for ourselves. As one professor, Michael Lowe, put it, we've created an artificial problem with our totally broken food system. We're just surrounded by cheap, processed food that is scientifically engineered to make us eat more and more. And now we've invented an artificial solution to deal with the fallout. There's this famous experiment, they called it Cheesecake Park, that just shows how powerful our food environment is. They took a bunch of rats, gave them their natural, healthy food, and they all stayed a healthy weight. Then they introduced junk food. Cheesecake, bacon, the works. The rats became obsessed. They ate compulsively until they were obese. But here's the really shocking part. When the scientists took the junk food away, the rats would literally starve themselves rather than go back to the healthy food. Their brains had been totally rewired. But it doesn't have to be this way. Widespread obesity isn't just an automatic side effect of being a wealthy country. Just look at Japan. They got rich without getting fat. They made deliberate choices, culturally and in their government, about their food. Things like banning processed food in schools and teaching kids about nutrition from the time they're 5 years old. But instead of changing our environment, it really seems like we're just doubling down on the artificial fix. And the demand is just unbelievable. Polls show that almost half of all Americans are ready and willing to take these drugs. We are at a cultural tipping point where tens of millions of people could be on these drugs for the rest of their lives. So all of this brings us to a fundamental choice. Are we just going to accept our broken food environment and turn to a lifelong, expensive, and potentially risky drug, a sort of mass biological upgrade just to cope with modern life? Or do we demand that we fix the environment that made us sick in the first place? These drugs are here, and they are changing everything. But what they ultimately end up representing, well, that's up to us.